Hello, friends. Night has already fallen, and the day was long and tiring. And now, it is time to rest. As always, I will tell you a kind legend that once took place in our beloved Middle-earth. So, settle in comfortably, gently close your eyes, and let our journey begin. In the waning years of the First Age, when the fires of war still burned across Beleriand and the shadow of Morgoth stretched long and black upon the lands of elves and men, there lived one whose heart was never at rest upon the shore. His name was Eärendil, son of Tuor of the house of Hador, and Idril Celebrindal, daughter of Turgon, the king of Gondolin. Half of the blood of elves was in his veins, and half the blood of men, and within him the two kindreds found a rare harmony, a strength that few others could claim. He was a mariner and a dreamer, and from the day he first looked upon the sea, its song called him with a power he could not resist. Yet even as he sailed the western waters, his heart remained burdened by the sorrow of his people. For Morgoth, the dark enemy of the world, still held Angband in the far north, and from his fortress came the legions of orcs and bolrogs, spreading ruin through every fair land. The Noldor were scattered, the Sindar driven into hiding, and the houses of men broken or enslaved. Then one night, as Eärendil stood alone upon the prow of his ship Vingelot, gazing westward across the waves, a strange light rose upon the horizon. It was pale as moonlight, yet steady and clear as the morning star. He thought it a dream, for it shimmered above the water like a lantern held by unseen hands. But as he watched, the light drew nearer, and a voice spoke within his heart, not in words, but in the music of the sea itself. Eärendil, son of both worlds, it seemed to say. The time of waiting draws to its end. The Valar listen no more to the cries of the Noldor, yet the doom of the world lies still in your hands. Seek the spear of Eglos, that was broken and lost in the ruin of Gondolin, for a black flame stirs in the north, and no light of the stars may withstand it, save that which is borne by your own hand. Eärendil fell to his knees, trembling, for he knew the voice of Ulmo, Lord of Waters, who alone among the Valar had not forsaken the exiles, and though fear gripped him, a fire awoke in his heart. For he understood that Morgoth was forging some new terror, a flame that could devour even the Silmarills, those hallowed jewels made by Fëanor in ages past. If such a power were unleashed, no army of elf or man could stand against it. When morning came, he set Vingelot toward the shores of Middle-earth once more, though Elwing, his beloved wife, wept to see him go. "Do not venture alone into the lands of shadow," she said, her voice trembling like a harp string in the wind, "for Morgoth's gaze is long, and his hatred longer still." Eärendil took her hands and kissed her brow. "If I do not return," he said softly, "then know that my heart shall never leave you. But if hope yet lives, it must be sought where fear forbids the way. Ulmo has spoken, and I must obey." Thus he returned in secret to the eastern shores, to the hidden havens of Círdan the shipwright. There he gathered what few allies remained to him. Amdir, a Sindarin ranger who had once fought beside Thingol of Doriath. Barazun, a dwarf smith out of Belegost, whose skill with metal was second only to his loyalty. And Lindwyn, an elf maiden of Doriath, who had lost all her kin in the wars of the Girdle's breaking. When they met beneath the grey cliffs of the coast, Círdan himself came forth to greet them, his beard silver as foam. "Long have I awaited tidings such as these," he said. "The seas whisper that the enemy stirs again in Angband, weaving fires of unholy might. If Ulmo has chosen you, Eärendil, then the path before you is both perilous and true. Eärendil bowed his head. Then I will walk it, whatever the cost. Tell me, do any yet know the resting place of the spear of Aeglos? Círdan's eyes grew grave. Aeglos, the spear of the High King, was lost in the ruin of Gondolin. None have dared seek it since, for the Vale of Tumladen lies buried beneath fire and stone. Yet some say that deep within those ruins, guarded by the spirits of the fallen, the weapons of Turgon's house still remain, untouched by time or foe. So be it, said Eärendil. Then to Gondolin we must go. Thus began the quest that would lead them into the heart of ruin. They travelled first along the western shores, through lands where once fair cities had stood, but now only ashes lay. The trees were blackened, and rivers ran thick with silt from the mountains that Morgoth had broken. Yet through all their journey, Eärendil kept his eyes fixed northward, where the clouds hung darkest, for there he knew the Shadow's heart beat strongest. By night they camped beneath the stars, and often Eärendil would climb a hill to gaze toward the sea, whispering words to Elwing carried on the wind. And though none spoke of it, they all felt the same weight pressing upon them, the knowledge that they walked a path from which few, if any, might return. Still, they pressed onward, for hope, once kindled, can burn brighter than any flame of shadow. And in the hush before dawn, as the company crossed into the wild lands that had once been the realm of Nevrast, the first glimmer of light touched Eärendil's face, and his eyes shone with resolve. The stars will not abandon us, he said softly, nor shall we abandon them. And thus, the journey to reclaim the spear of Aeglos, and with it, the fate of all free peoples, began. The dawn came pale and windless upon the western coast, a thin light breaking through the veil of mist that clung to the rocks and waves. Vingilot, Eärendil's ship, lay moored among the jagged stones, its silver prow gleaming faintly in the chill. Around a small fire the company gathered, breaking their fast in silence. Their journey had begun in earnest, and already the air seemed to grow heavier with each mile they travelled north. Eärendil rose first, his cloak billowing faintly in the morning breeze. He stood upon a high ledge, gazing eastward over the desolate lands that had once been fair Nevrast, homeland of his father Tuor. Only broken towers and shards of white marble remained now, half buried in the sand. Yet beneath the ruin, the sea murmured of lost glory, and Eärendil thought he could almost hear the echoes of Gondolin's bells, long silent beneath the mountains. Amdir came to stand beside him, his keen grey eyes scanning the horizon. "The road ahead is cruel," he said quietly. "The plains of Ardgarlan are gone, turned to ash and smoke when Morgoth's fires poured forth. What once was green is now the plain of Anfaglith, the dust of death. We shall find little shelter there." "We shall find none at all if we delay," Eärendil answered. "The black flame grows with every day that passes. Ulmo's warning was clear. If we do not strike before its strength is full, all Beleriand may fall into shadow before the Valar even know of it." Barrazun the dwarf, who had been tightening the leather of his pack, snorted softly. "Then let us meet this doom swiftly, as dwarves prefer. I've no fondness for creeping fears or endless waiting." Lindwyn smiled faintly at his gruffness. "Few among your folk ever had," she said, her voice light as falling leaves. "But haste and folly often share the same road. The Shadow's lands are not kind to those who rush blindly." Barrazun frowned but said no more. Eärendil turned from the sea, his eyes bright with purpose. Then we move. Each day we tarry is a day. Morgoth strengthens his hand. They struck inland, following old paths long forgotten by men. The forests thinned, giving way to rolling hills and cracked earth, and by the third night they came to the ruins of Vinyamar, where once stood the halls of Turgon, before Gondolin was built. Only the seagulls lingered now, their cries echoing through the hollow stone. Within those empty halls, Eärendil found his father's mark carved into the wall, a single line of runes, weathered but clear. Seek not the city's echo, but the mountain's heart. It was enough to confirm their course. They turned northeast, toward the mountains that had swallowed Gondolin whole in its fiery ruin. Days passed into weeks. The lands grew darker as they neared the shadow of Thangorodrim, whose peaks rose black against the sky. Even from afar, the air seemed tainted. The wind carried with it a bitter smell, like burnt iron and decay. Often they moved by night, avoiding the open plains where Morgoth's scouts ranged. And though they kept no fire to mark their camp, strange lights flickered sometimes upon the horizon, glows like molten eyes, watching from the dark. One evening, while the stars burned faintly through a veil of smoke, Lindwyn took the first watch. Her keen ears caught the faintest rustle beyond the rocks, a sound too deliberate for the wind. She rose silently, bow in hand, and moved toward the shadows. A figure stepped forth, a man, or what seemed one. His cloak was torn and blackened with soot, his face hidden by a hood. Yet his voice, when he spoke, was calm. "Do not fear. I seek no harm. You are travelers bound north, are you not?" Lindwyn kept her arrow drawn. "Few wander these lands without evil purpose. Speak your name." The stranger lowered his hood, revealing pale, sharp features and eyes that gleamed faintly blue. "My name is Sarnor, once a captain in the service of Medros, before the sons of Feanor were scattered. I have wandered these wastes since the fall of Himring, and I know the paths that lead beneath the mountains. If Gondolin you seek, then you shall need a guide." Eärendil, awakened by the sound of voices, approached swiftly. His gaze fell upon the man, and he saw both weariness and fire in those eyes, a soul touched by many battles. "If you speak truth, then you are welcome among us," he said. "But know this, our road leads into peril from which there may be no return." Sarnor bowed his head. "Then it is no different from the path I have walked since Himring burned." So he joined them, and their number became 5. With his guidance they found hidden ways through the cliffs and ravines, narrow roads once used by elves, fleeing westward from Angband's wars. Yet even as Sarnor spoke of old battles, Eärendil sensed a shadow upon him, some unspoken grief that weighed heavily on his heart. At last they came to the edge of Unfoglith, the ashen plain where no living thing grew. The air shimmered faintly with heat, and the ground beneath their feet was cracked like a burned parchment. Far to the north rose the black teeth of Thangorodrim, belching smoke that veiled the stars. But westward, beyond the broken ridges, the faint line of a valley could be seen, a cleft where once the hidden way of Gondolin had lain. "There," said Eärendil, "there lies the gate to our hope." Yet even as he spoke, the wind shifted, and from the shadowed ridge came a sound like claws scraping upon stone. Dozens of eyes gleamed in the dark, low and yellow. "Orcs!" hissed Amdir, drawing his sword. Barazun hefted his axe. At last, something solid to strike. The creatures poured down the slope, warriors of Angband clad in rough iron, their shrieks echoing through the plain. The company stood their ground, forming a narrow circle among the rocks. Steel met steel, and the air filled with the clash of battle. Eärendil's blade shone with a faint white light, and every stroke he dealt struck true. Lindwin's arrows sang, swift and deadly, while Barrazun's axe roared like thunder. When the last of the orcs fell, silence returned, save for the harsh breathing of the living. The earth was dark with blood. But one shadow yet remained, Sarnor standing apart, a black wound seeping beneath his armor. Eärendil rushed to him, but the man raised a hand. "No, it is nothing," he murmured. Yet his eyes gleamed strangely, and his voice trembled. "We have been marked, my lord. Morgoth knows we are here." Eärendil looked northward, and the darkness above Thangorodrim seemed to pulse like a living thing. A red light flickered among the clouds, distant, yet watchful. "The black flame," whispered Lindwin, and the wind that swept across the plain carried with it the faintest whisper, a voice that was not wind at all, but something far more dreadful. "Come," it seemed to hiss. "Come, child of the sea. Come and see the fire that devours even the stars." Then all fell still. Eärendil tightened his grip on his sword, his gaze fixed upon the mountains. "So be it," he said softly. "Let the shadow know our coming. We do not turn back." And beneath the darkened sky of Beleriand, the company of 5 pressed onward, into the heart of ruin, and toward the forgotten gates of Gondolin. For 7 days they crossed the waste of Anfoglith, where the very air seemed to breathe death. The ground was grey and brittle beneath their boots, and now and again the bones of fallen warriors jutted from the dust, elves and men alike, long since forgotten. No sound of birds or streams touched those lands, only the distant thunder of Thangorodrim and the crack of the wind that smelled of ash. Eärendil went before them, his cloak wrapped tight against the foul air. He carried a shard of crystal upon his breast, a gift of Círdan, that glowed faintly when darkness thickened. Its light steadied their hearts, for it seemed that the shadows shrank from it, and they could almost imagine the stars still watched from above. On the 5th night, they came to a deep rift, a canyon cleaving the plain from east to west. Its sides were sheer and black, like glass cooled from fire. Sarnor knelt by the edge, his pale eyes gleaming as he studied the fissure. "This was not made by hand, nor by time," he murmured. "Here the earth split when the mountains broke at Gondolin's fall. Beyond this gorge lies Tumladen, or what remains of it." Barrazun peered into the chasm and spat. "And how do you propose we cross? No bridge stands, and the depths have no bottom." "Wait," said Lindwin softly, her keen gaze sweeping the cliffs. "There, on the far side. Do you see that shadow? It moves not with the wind." They looked, and indeed, a dark archway could be faintly discerned, half buried beneath the slope. It was the entrance to a tunnel, or so it seemed. Amdia's eyes narrowed. Away beneath the gorge, it must have been a secret road from the days of Gondolin's glory. Sarnor nodded. "Aye, though few such ways remained open after the fall. Yet it may still lead us through." Eärendil said nothing, but his hand tightened upon his sword hilt. "Then let us take it. The night grows darker, and I feel eyes upon us." They descended into the cleft, their torches flickering weakly in the suffocating air. The walls seemed to close about them, and from the depths rose the sound of dripping water. At times they passed carvings half buried in soot, runes of the house of Turgon, worn by years of fire and sorrow. When at last they reached the archway, Sarnor paused. He laid his palm upon the black stone, whispering words in the tongue of the Noldor. Faint light traced the runes beneath his hand, forming the crest of a white tower wreathed in stars. "It opens still," he said quietly. The gate yawned inward, exhaling a breath of air so cold it stung their lungs. Beyond lay a long passage, carved by ancient skill. The company entered, and darkness swallowed them whole. Hours passed, or perhaps days. They could not tell. The tunnel wound ever downward, the air growing heavy and still. Faint sounds echoed through the stone, like whispers of voices long dead. Barsoom muttered that he liked it not. Lindwyn's face was pale, but her eyes were steady. At length they came to a vast chamber, its roof lost in shadow. Pillars of white marble rose like trees of bone, and upon the floor lay a ruin of banners and broken arms. Eärendil lifted his torch higher and gasped. Before them stretched a hall of the fallen, the tomb of Gondolin's guard. The bodies lay as they had died, their armor still bright though centuries had passed. At the far end stood a high dais, upon which rested a single object, wrapped in tattered silk. Eärendil approached, reverently. He lifted the shroud, and there, gleaming faintly in the light, lay a spear of silver and ice. "The spear of Eglos," whispered Lindwyn, awe softening her voice. "Forged in the elder days for the High King himself." Eärendil touched the weapon. It was cold, yet beneath the chill he felt a living pulse, as if the metal still remembered the hands that once wielded it. The runes upon its shaft were clear, and the blade shimmered with pale fire. Then a voice echoed through the hall, deep and sorrowful. "Who dares disturb the rest of the fallen?" The company turned. From the shadows between the pillars came faint lights, forms of elves, tall and fair. Yet their faces were like the pale moon, and their eyes burned with the memory of death. Lindwyn bowed low. "We mean no desecration, noble spirits. We come in need. The darkness rises anew, and only the spear may stand against it." The foremost of the spirits stepped forth, his armor rent but still radiant. "The spear belongs to the line of kings," he said. "By what right do you claim it?" Eärendil met his gaze unflinching. "By the blood of Eärendil, daughter of Turgon, and of Tuor, her husband. I am their son, Eärendil, of the House of the White Wing. I seek not power, but deliverance." The spirit's eyes softened. A faint smile touched his lips, and his voice changed. Less like thunder, more like wind through leaves. Then the blood of Gondolin, yet flows in the world above. Take it, son of Eärendil. May its light guide you through the shadows yet to come. As he spoke, the spirits bowed, their forms fading like mist in sunlight. The hall grew still once more. Eärendil lifted Eglos high. The blade blazed with a sudden white flame that cast light across the chamber. Barsoom grinned despite himself. "A fine weapon indeed," he muttered. "Almost makes the stench of this place worth the journey." But even as they rejoiced, the ground trembled beneath their feet. From the far end of the tunnel came a rumble, deep and distant. Dust fell from the ceiling. "What is that?" Amdir shouted. Sarnor's face had gone white. "We have lingered too long. Morgoth's servants guard these ways, even still. The sound of the spear's awakening has reached them." They fled through the tunnel, the light of Eglos blazing their path. Behind them came the sound of pursuit, howls, the clatter of claws upon stone. The air grew hot, and red light flickered along the walls. Then, bursting from the mouth of the passage, they found themselves beneath the open sky once more. Before them stretched the valley of Tumladen, no longer green, but a desolation of glass and stone. Steam rose from the fissures that crisscrossed the plain, and in the distance, the broken towers of Gondolin jutted like the bones of a dead giant. They had reached the heart of ruin. But before Eärendil could draw breath, a roar split the air. From the shattered gates of the city rose a creature vast and terrible, its form wreathed in black flame, its eyes burning like molten gold. Baruzun swore, stumbling back. "By Durin's beard! What is that thing?" Eärendil's gaze hardened. "The Guardian," he said. "The flame that Ulmo warned of. The black flame itself." The creature spread its wings, and the fire that clung to its body devoured the light. The ground trembled with every step it took, and the air grew thick with heat. "Back to the rocks!" Amdir shouted, drawing his sword. But Eärendil did not move. He stood his ground, the spear of Eglos blazing in his hands. "No," he said, his voice calm amid the storm. "This is why we came." And as the black flame descended upon them, the light of the spear met the fire of shadow, and the valley of Gondolin was bathed once more in a light as fierce as the rising of the sun. The black flame rose from the ruins of Gondolin like a storm unchained. It towered above the broken towers, a mass of seething fire and darkness that took no fixed shape. One moment like a dragon crowned in ash, the next like a man cloaked in smoke, his eyes twin furnaces of gold. From its maw poured a sound like the tearing of the world itself, a scream that shattered stone and set the air trembling. Eärendil stood firm, though the heat seared his face, and the force of the creature's presence drove the others to their knees. In his hands, the spear of Eglos blazed white-blue, its light pure as starlight, cutting through the choking dark. He felt the power of the weapon surge through him like ice, and fire joined, and though his heart faltered, his will did not. "Back!" he cried to his companions. "Find shelter in the rocks. This battle is mine to begin." Lindwyn seized his arm, her eyes wide with fear. "You cannot face that thing alone." "I must," he answered. "If I fall, flee south. Tell Círdan what has awoken here. But while I live, I will not yield this ground." Baruzun cursed softly under his breath. "Elves and their doom-lust," he muttered, gripping his axe. "Well, if I am to die, I'd rather it be in good company." And with that, he took his place beside Eärendil. The black flame moved with the speed of a thunderbolt, sweeping down the valley in a wave of burning wind. Fire lashed the ground, and stones melted like wax. The creature struck, a claw of living shadow, but Eglos met it head-on. The spear's light exploded outward, cleaving the darkness with a sound like a breaking bell. The flame recoiled, hissing, and the air filled with sparks that burned holes in the earth. Eärendil drove forward, his voice ringing above the roar. "In the name of the Vala who remember, and of the fallen kings of Gondolin, back to the pit that spawned you." The creature answered not in words, but in laughter, a deep and dreadful mirth that shook the mountains. "You are a fool, son of water and starlight," it rumbled, its voice echoing in his mind more than his ears. "Do you not know me? I am the fire that devours light, the breath of Morgoth's wrath, the heart of his forge. Against me, no star endures." It reared, casting down a torrent of flame. Eärendil raised the spear, and the two powers met again, white light against red fire. The clash sent shockwaves through the valley, toppling what remained of Gondolin's walls. For a moment, the light of Eglos dimmed, and the darkness pressed close, suffocating. Then came Amdir, darting from cover, his sword gleaming. With a cry, he leapt upon the creature's flank, striking at the shadows that bound its form. The blade sank deep, and black flame burst forth like blood. The black flame screamed, and in its fury turned upon him. Amdir was flung aside, his body vanishing in the blaze. "No!" Lindwyn's voice rang out, clear and broken. She loosed arrow after arrow, each tipped with elven runes. They struck true, bursting into silver fire, yet the creature's wrath only grew. Eärendil saw his chance as it turned toward her. He surged forward, every muscle burning, and thrust Aeglos deep into the creature's chest. The light blazed so bright that all shadows fled. For an instant, the world seemed to hold its breath. The black flame shrieked, its form convulsing, and the fire that clothed it began to unravel. But even as the light drove it back, a tendril of shadow coiled from its heart and struck Eärendil full in the chest. The blow hurled him to the ground, his breath torn from him. Aeglos fell from his hands, still burning, and the creature loomed above him once more, diminished yet unbroken. "Did you think," it whispered, voice like molten iron, "that light alone could unmake me? I am born of the dark power, the remnant of his first flame, older than the world of stars. You cannot destroy what was kindled by the hand of the enemy himself." Eärendil gasped, his vision swimming. The air was thick with ash. Then through the roar of flame came another sound, a deep, resonant chant. Barad-dûn stood upon a shattered ledge, both hands upon his axe, shouting words of power in Khuzdul. The runes on his weapon flared red, and with a mighty cry, he hurled it into the creature's chest beside the spear. The explosion that followed tore the sky apart. The black flame reeled, fire bursting outward in a storm that swept across the valley. The mountains groaned, and molten rock spilled from the cliffs. When the light at last dimmed, the creature's form was gone, dissolved into smoke. Only the echo of its voice lingered, faint and hateful. "You haven't destroyed me, mariner. The fire sleeps, but it shall rise again, in the end of days." Silence fell. The wind returned, cold and sharp. The ground beneath them was cracked and blackened, and the ruins of Gondolin lay once more in peace. Eärendil staggered to his feet. His armor was scorched, his hands blistered, but his eyes burned bright. Beside him, Barad-dûn knelt, coughing, his beard singed, and his face pale. Lindwyn ran to them, tears cutting tracks through the soot upon her cheeks. "Amdir is gone," she whispered. "I saw him fall." Eärendil bowed his head. "He will be remembered among the brave of both kindreds." Sarnor, who had sheltered them with his shield during the blast, stood slowly. His face was grim. "The black flame may be driven off, but not destroyed," he said. "You heard its words. Its master yet lives in Angband." Eärendil nodded wearily. "Then we have won but a reprieve. Yet even that is no small thing." He turned his gaze toward the north, where the clouds still glowed faintly red. "We have bought the world a breath of time, and I will not let it be wasted." They gathered what strength remained to them, and began the long climb from the valley. Behind them, the ruins of Gondolin smoldered faintly in the dusk, the last light of the battle fading into the stars. When they reached the heights, Eärendil looked once more upon the spear of Aeglos. Its tip was blackened, the haft cracked, but the light within it still pulsed faintly. "Ulmo sent me here for this," he said softly, "and now it must go westward, where none of Morgoth's servants can reach it. The Valar must be told that the black flame yet burns." Sarnor bowed low. "Then your path lies beyond these shores, Eärendil. But mine ends here. The sons of Fëanor failed to keep their oaths. Perhaps in guarding these ruins, I may find peace for my own." Eärendil clasped his shoulder. "May the stars watch over you, Sarnor of the North." And so they parted, Eärendil, Lindwyn, and Barad-dûn, turning west once more toward the sea, their hearts heavy, but their purpose clear. Behind them, the valley of Gondolin slept beneath the ashes, its ghosts at last at rest. Yet high above, unseen by mortal eyes, a single star flickered into being, bright and steady over the ruins. And though Eärendil did not see it then, that light was the first sign of what his destiny would one day become. For the mariner had not yet reached his greatest voyage, nor had the last of Morgoth's fires been quenched, but for that night the land was silent, and the shadow of the black flame was driven back into the dark. The sea wind returned to them at last. After many days' journey from the desolation of Gondolin, Eärendil and his 2 remaining companions came once more to the western coasts. The land there was scarred by fire and war, but the great waters still breathed with the same endless rhythm, washing the blackened stones with foam as white as snow. It was as though the sea had waited for them, patient and sorrowful. Eärendil stood upon a ridge overlooking the shore, the spear of Aeglos wrapped in linen at his side. The weapon no longer shone as it once had, yet a faint pulse of light still stirred within the haft, like a heart that would not die. Lindwen and Barrazun came beside him, weary beyond words. "There lies the end of our road," said Barrazun, his voice rough but steady. "The sea, and beyond it, the fate of the world." Eärendil nodded. "Aye, but it is not the end of our task." Ulmo's call was clear. This weapon must be borne beyond the reach of Morgoth, and I must plead for the aid of the Valar. The time for wandering is done. I will sail. Lindwen looked out upon the waves, her eyes dark and distant. "Few who have sought the west in these days have found it," she said. "The shadow's hand lies long upon the world. Even the ships of Círdan no longer find the straight road." "Then I shall make my own," Eärendil replied, a quiet fire kindling in his voice. "If no path remains open, I will carve one with this spear, and the light of the stars shall guide me." Barrazun grinned faintly. "Stubborn as stone," he said. "Were you born among dwarves, you'd have made a fine Smith King." Eärendil's smile was brief but genuine. "You have my thanks, Barrazun of Belegost. No heart truer ever walked beside me. But I would not ask you to follow me across the sea. The doom of this voyage is mine alone." The dwarf's eyes flashed. "Then you do not know me as well as you think, Elf Lord. I have crossed fire and shadow at your side, and I'll not turn back now. The sea may claim me, but I will not abandon a comrade." Before Eärendil could answer, Lindwen spoke. "And neither will I. My kin perished long ago. My home lies in ruins, and the light of Doriath is gone from the world. If there is still a path that leads toward hope, even a faint one, I would walk it beside you." Eärendil looked upon them both, and his heart swelled with gratitude. "Then so be it. Together we shall make for the havens, and find a ship fit for the task." They journeyed westward through lands grown silent and strange, where once the fields of Hithlum had stretched green beneath the sun. Now only grey ash remained. The rivers ran shallow, and the forests were choked with brambles. Yet sometimes, in the stillness of twilight, the light of Eärendil's crystal would flare softly, and the wind would carry a whisper as of distant singing. Ulmo's hand was still upon them. At length they came to the mouth of the river Nenning, where the havens of Círdan still stood. The great shipwright greeted them with wonder, for he had long believed Eärendil lost. "Long have I awaited tidings of your fate," said Círdan, his silver hair gleaming in the dawn light. "The seas themselves told me that the black flame rose in the north, and that it was met with light from the ruins of Gondolin. So you have fulfilled Ulmo's bidding?" "In part," Eärendil answered. "The spear of Aeglos is won, and the black flame was struck down, though not destroyed. Its malice sleeps, and will wake again if the Valar do not act. I must sail west and bear word of this to their halls." Círdan's eyes grew grave. "You know the peril of such a journey. No mortal vessel has reached Aman since the doom was spoken." Yet if any may find that path, it is you, Eärendil half-elven, who carry in your blood both the doom and the hope of the two kindreds." He led them to his greatest ship, one built for beauty and for strength, its hull white as sea foam, and its sails woven with silver thread. "This is Vingilot reborn," said Círdan. "She was crafted after your design, for I dreamed you might return to claim her. Her keel is wrought from the timber of Nimloth, the white tree of Balar, and her masts are set with crystal. If any vessel can brave the shadowed seas, it will be this." For 3 days and nights they labored to prepare Vingilot for the voyage. Barrazun reforged the spearhead of Eglos, binding its light within new steel. Lindwyn carved runes of warding upon the sails, that no storm or dark wind might tear them, and Eärendil stood at the prow, watching the horizon, listening to the murmuring of the waves, as though hearing words in their endless song. On the morning of the 4th day, Círdan came to them once more. "You go where none have dared in all the long years since the exile of the Noldor," he said. "If the West rejects you, you may never return. Yet if it hears you, perhaps the world may be healed." Eärendil bowed low. "If I fall, may my ship be my tomb. But if I succeed, let the morning star bear witness that hope still endures." As the sun rose, they set sail. The wind filled the silver sails of Vingilot, and she glided from the harbor like a swan taking wing. Upon the cliffs, Círdan and his folk watched in silence until the white ship vanished into the mist. Days turned to weeks as they crossed the wide sea. At first, the winds were fair, and the stars shone brightly. Eärendil took his place at the helm each night, guiding their course by constellations known only to the Eldar. Lindwyn sang softly to the waves, her voice mingling with the sigh of the water. Even Barrazun, unused to the sea, grew silent and thoughtful, staring into the vastness around them. But the further west they sailed, the heavier the air became. Clouds gathered, thick and black, and the wind turned cold. No stars were seen. The waves rose high, grey and angry, and the sea roared like a living thing. Then, upon the 7th night, a great darkness fell, deeper than any storm. The moon vanished, and the world seemed swallowed by shadow. The ship shuddered as though gripped by unseen hands, and a voice rose from the depths, echoing through the hull. "You dare to cross the shadowed sea," it said, low and terrible. "You dare to bear the light of elves and men where none are welcome. Turn back, mariner, or be swallowed by the deep." Eärendil gripped the spore and lifted it high. A pale light burst from its tip, piercing the gloom. "I will not turn back," he cried. "I bear the plea of all who yet fight beneath the shadow. If the Valar will not hear me, then let the sea itself bear my words." The waves rose like walls around them, crashing in fury, but Vingilot held her course. The light of Eglos burned brighter, driving the darkness before it. The voice screamed in rage, and the sea boiled. But then, suddenly, all was still. The clouds broke apart, and before them stretched a calm so vast and clear that the stars themselves seemed to bow upon its surface. A path of silver light appeared across the water, leading westward into the unknown. Eärendil lowered the spear, breathless. "The straight road," he whispered. And Vingilot sailed on, gliding upon that shining path toward the lands no mortal had seen, and toward the doom that would shape the end of the First Age. The straight road shone before them like a river of glass laid across the face of the world. It curved upward, as though the sea itself had become a bridge, and the stars burned brighter along its length. The wind was gentle, and Vingilot glided upon the waters without sound. No waves broke her path, and the sea beneath seemed deeper than the night sky above. Eärendil stood at the prow, his hand upon the haft of Eglos, whose pale light guided them still. Lindwen kept watch beside him, her eyes wide with awe, while Barrazun muttered softly to himself, clutching the rail. "I do not trust this calm," the dwarf said. "The sea should sing, not whisper. When the world grows too quiet, it hides something waiting to strike." Lindwen smiled faintly. "Not all silence is danger, Barrazun. Sometimes it is only peace." "Peace," he grumbled, "is what a dwarf finds only when his feet are on solid rock." Yet he said no more, for even his rough heart felt the strangeness and the holiness of that place. For 3 days they sailed upon the straight road. Time itself seemed to lose its measure. They neither hungered nor thirsted, and sleep came lightly, as though they drifted within a dream. The stars wheeled in patterns unknown to mortal sight, and once Eärendil thought he saw shapes moving among them. Vast, luminous forms like the wings of swans gliding through the firmament. On the 4th night, a mist rose from the sea, bright as moonlight yet cold as mountain frost. It thickened about the ship, so that they could no longer see the stars. The air shimmered with faint music, and voices whispered within the mist, soft, sorrowful, and fair. "Who comes unbidden to the shores of the west?" they said. "What mortal hand dares the paths that were closed by the doom of the Valar?" Eärendil lifted his voice in answer, his words clear and solemn. "I am Eärendil, son of Idril of Gondolin, and Tuor of the House of Hador. I come not in pride, but in need. The shadow of Morgoth has grown beyond all strength of elves and men, and only the Valar may turn the tide. Grant me passage, that I may plead for mercy on behalf of the world." The voices fell silent. The mist swirled, drawing back as though stirred by unseen winds, and a light like the dawn broke through. Then before them appeared a vast gate of pearl and silver, its arch carved with runes of ancient power. It seemed to float upon the sea, though it touched neither water nor sky. From the gate came a figure, tall and bright, robed in white that shone like frost beneath the stars. His eyes were as clear as the depths of the sea, and his hair was silver as foam. Lindwen bowed low, for she knew him by sight from the songs of the Eldar. "Ulmo, Lord of Waters," she whispered. Eärendil fell to one knee. "My lord, it was by your guidance I came hither. I seek the aid of the Valar against the Black Enemy, who still holds Middle-earth in darkness." Ulmo regarded him long and silently. Then he spoke, his voice deep and resonant, like the breaking of distant waves. "Long have I watched your voyage, Eärendil, and long have I borne the cries of the Forsaken to the shores of Aman. Yet none of the Valar have heeded them, for the doom of Mandos lies heavy still upon the Noldor. But you are of both kindreds, elf and man, and thus bound to neither fate. Perhaps through you a new hope may come." He extended his hand, and the waters before Vingelo parted, revealing a hidden road of light stretching beyond the gate. "Sail on," said Ulmo. "The land you seek lies beyond the bend of the world. Yet remember this: no mortal may set foot upon Aman unbidden and remain unchanged." Eärendil bowed his head. "Whatever doom awaits me, I will bear it." Ulmo's form faded into mist, and the sea grew calm once more. The gate opened silently, and Vingelo passed through. Beyond the gate the light changed. The air grew soft and clear, filled with the scent of flowers and the sound of distant streams. Far ahead, mountains rose from the horizon, white and tall, crowned with eternal snow. Between their peaks shone a glow like the sun, though no sun was seen. Lindwen wept softly at the sight. So fair a land, she murmured. This must be Aman indeed. Baruzun stared, awe softening even his weathered face. I thought no beauty greater than the halls of stone beneath the blue mountains, he said. But this is a realm beyond all craft. As they neared the shore, the ship slowed, though no hand guided it. The waters beneath were clear as crystal, and within them they saw the reflection of the stars, even those that no longer shone in the sky above. Eärendil felt a weight in his chest, a mingling of joy and sorrow too great for words. When Vingilot touched the white sands, Eärendil stepped ashore, the spear of Eglos in his grasp. But even as his foot met the ground, a change came over him. The weariness of years fell away, yet with it went something of his mortal self. The light of his eyes deepened, and a faint radiance shone from his skin. Lindwyn cried out, reaching for him, but he turned and smiled sadly. "Fear not," he said. "The sea has claimed its due. I am no longer holy as I was." Before them stretched a land of surpassing beauty. Meadows glowed with living light, and rivers ran like silver threads through the grass. Great trees rose in the distance, their leaves shining as if wrought of gold and emerald. In the farthest west, a white city gleamed upon a hill, its towers tall and fair, its gates of crystal. Then from the city came a host of the Valar's servants, Maiar clad in robes of light. They bore no weapons, but the power of their presence stilled the air. At their head walked Eönwe, herald of Manwe, his banner bearing the emblem of the winds. "Eärendil, son of Idril," he said, "the Valar have heard your coming. You are summoned before the Elder King." Eärendil bowed. "Lead me then. I bear tidings of a darkness that threatens all the world." Eönwe turned, and the company followed. Baruzun and Lindwyn remained by the shore, for none but Eärendil was permitted to pass further. As he walked the shining road toward the city of Valimar, he felt the eyes of the gods upon him, ancient, terrible, and full of sorrow. At last he came before the throne of Manwe Sulimo, high upon Tanicatil. Around him sat the Valar in majesty. Varda, whose face was brighter than starlight, Ulmo, whose robes shimmered with the hues of the deep sea, and Mandos, silent and grave, whose gaze pierced all souls. Eärendil knelt, placing the spear of Eglos at the foot of the throne. "Lords of the West," he said, "I come from a land drowned in shadow. Morgoth still reigns in Angband, and his power grows unchecked. Even now his black flame seeks to devour the light of the world. I beg you, come and deliver us, or all hope will perish." For a long moment none spoke. Then Manwe rose, his voice like the wind over the heights of the world. "Your plea is just, and your courage beyond measure. Through you the two kindreds are joined, and through you they shall be saved. The time of our silence is ended. The hosts of the West shall march." The hall shook with the sound of his command. The banners of the Valar were raised, and trumpets sounded from the mountains. Eärendil bowed his head, tears filling his eyes. For the first time in many ages, hope stirred anew, and as the light of Aman grew about him, Vingilo shone upon the waves like a new star, heralding the dawn of the war that would end the First Age. The summons of the Valar rang across Aman like thunder, rolling from mountain to mountain. From the high halls of Tanicatil to the green plains of Valimar, the Maiar gathered in silence, their raiment gleaming like the dawn. No host had marched from the undying lands since the world was young, yet now the time had come, and the stillness of ages was broken. Eärendil stood upon the white terrace of the Elder King and looked down upon the mustering of the West. Never had he beheld such splendor. The hosts of Manwe, assembled in ordered ranks, their banners bright with stars and wind. Ulmo's servants moved like waves among them, their armor shimmering blue and silver, and the warriors of Aule bore hammers and axes that glowed with inner fire. Over all flew the eagles of Manwe, vast and strong, their wings dark against the bright sky. Beside Eärendil stood Eärendil, the herald of the Valar, now clad for war. "You have done what none dared," he said. "The Valar are moved at last. The hosts of the west shall sail eastward, and the shadow of Morgoth will tremble at their coming." Eärendil bowed his head. "Then let my ship lead the way. I have seen the lands of ruin with my own eyes. I will guide you through the mists to where the dark enemy hides." Eärendil's gaze was steady. "That is not yet your task, Eärendil. The light that you bear must go forth before all armies, to strike fear into the heart of the shadow. You shall sail the heavens in Vingilot, bearing the star of hope, that the children of Ilúvatar may know that help is coming." Eärendil was silent for a moment, his heart heavy. "To be set among the stars," he said softly, "and to look upon the world, but never again to walk its lands. Is that my fate?" From behind him came a voice, gentle and deep, and he turned to see Varda Elentari, Queen of the Stars. Her face was serene, and her eyes glowed with the light of creation. "It is no small fate, mariner," she said, "for through your light the hearts of both elves and men shall find courage. Your voyage shall never end, but neither shall your name fade." Eärendil bowed before her, and though sorrow touched his heart, he found peace in her words. "Then let it be so," he said. "I will bear the light of the West to all who still dwell in darkness." Thus the Valar set their hosts in motion. Great ships were fashioned upon the shores of Ammon, their hulls of white wood and their sails woven from the threads of the stars. Ulmo himself raised the seas to bear them, and the winds of Manwe filled their sails. Eärendil led them forth, his banner streaming like silver fire. But before the hosts departed, Varda took the light of the trees that yet dwelled within her keeping, and set a portion of it within a crystal vessel. This she gave to Eärendil, saying, "This is the Silmaril, hallowed and redeemed. Its flame shall guide your ship through the night, and pierce even the shadow of Morgoth." She placed it upon his brow, and the light of the Silmaril shone so bright that all of Ammon was bathed in radiance. Vingilot, moored upon the clear waters of Eldamar, gleamed like a living star. Lindwyn and Barazun stood upon the quay, watching in silence as Eärendil stepped aboard. "My friends," he said, "I go where no mortal or elf may follow, but the light I bear shall shine upon Middle-earth, and perhaps you will see it, and know that all we have done was not in vain." Lindwyn's eyes filled with tears. "We will remember," she said. "Wherever that light shines, our hearts shall follow." Barazun bowed low. "If ever I see that star in the deep places of the world, I'll drink to it in your name." Eärendil smiled. "Then farewell, brave hearts. May the Valar guard you until we meet beyond the end of days." He took the helm, and Vingilot rose upon the waters. The ship glided out into the open sea, its sails bright with starlight. As it passed the horizon, a wind lifted it upward, and slowly, silently, Vingilot climbed into the sky. The waves fell away beneath it, and the clouds parted like a silver curtain. When the ship reached the heights of the heavens, Varda raised her hand, and the light of the Silmaril flared, becoming a beacon among the stars. So was born the morning and the evening star, the brightest of all lights, save the sun and moon. And Eärendil sailed the heavens, a guardian of hope, forever watching the world below. Meanwhile, the hosts of the Valar crossed the sea. The straight road opened before them, and the mountains of Aman faded behind. When at last they reached the coasts of Middle-earth, they came with storm and fire. The trumpets of Eärendil rang across the sky, and the clouds broke apart as if in terror. Morgoth's servants fled before the sight, for never since the making of the world had such a power come forth. The mountains of Thangorodrim trembled, and the fires of Angband guttered. Yet the dark enemy was cunning. From the depths of his pits he sent forth his legions, Balrogs wreathed in flame, dragons whose breath was death, and countless orcs clad in iron. The plain of Anfauglith became a battlefield once more, but this time the light of the west shone upon it. Eärendil, high above, looked down from the firmament and saw the hosts of the Valar advance. He saw the fires of war ignite the north, and his heart stirred with fierce pride. Then, from the shadows of Angband, he beheld the black flame stir again, diminished yet alive, reborn from the embers of its defeat. It rose against the armies of the west, a storm of burning shadow that blotted out the sky. The dragons followed it, their wings darkening with the sun. But Eärendil turned Vingolot toward them, and the Silmaril flared like a sword of light. Down he swept from the heavens, and the hosts of Morgoth quailed. The black flame reared, its voice thundering across the plain. "You again, son of water and star! The fire you struck down cannot die!" Eärendil answered with no word, but with the cry of his horn that echoed through the vault of the world. The spear of Eglos, reforged anew in Valinor, burned in his hand. From his ship he cast it like a bolt of white flame, and it struck the heart of the black flame. The creature screamed, and its body burst asunder, scattering like embers caught by the wind. The dragons faltered, their wings folding as the light of the Silmaril blinded them. They fell upon the mountains, and their ruin shook the earth. Thus was the black flame ended forever, its last spark quenched by the mariner's light. Below, the armies of the Valar pressed onward, breaking the gates of Angband and casting down Morgoth's towers. The war that followed was long and terrible, but Eärendil's light burned over the field, and hope didn't fail. When at last Morgoth was overthrown and bound in chains, the world was broken and renewed. The Valar returned to the west, and Eärendil remained in the sky, a guardian of the dawn. Far below, in the quiet lands that survived the ruin, the first men of the New Age looked up at the morning star, and named it Gil-Estel, the Star of High Hope. And though Eärendil would never again walk upon the earth, he saw from afar the glimmer of peace returning to the world he had saved, and he was content. So ended the voyage of the mariner and the long war of the black flame, a tale of sorrow and of light, and of a hope that no darkness could ever extinguish. The War of Wrath had ended, and the roar of battle faded from the north. The hosts of Morgoth were scattered or destroyed. His fortress of Angband was broken, its pits filled with the ruin of the earth. Bound in unbreakable chains, the dark enemy was dragged before the thrones of the Valar, and his crown of iron was beaten into a collar for his neck. The Silmarils that he had stolen burned his hands, for the light of their purity could no longer abide the touch of his evil. Thus, at last, Morgoth was cast beyond the walls of the world into the outer void, and his voice was heard no more in Arda. Yet though the great war was ended, the cost was beyond reckoning. The northern lands were shattered, mountains had fallen, rivers had changed their courses, and the seas had swallowed vast kingdoms. Beleriand, the fairest of all realms, was broken and sunk beneath the waves. The green hills of Doriath, the white towers of Gondolin, and the proud halls of Nargothrond were gone forever, their memory fading into the songs of those few who survived. Eärendil beheld all from the high paths of the heavens, His ship Vingelot sailed still upon the upper airs, its silver hull gleaming with the fire of the Silmaril. From his lofty course, he watched the world renewed by both light and sorrow. He saw the lands of Middle-earth remade, new mountains rising where the old had fallen, and fresh rivers flowing where once there had been dust and ruin. Beside him, the wind whispered ever of the sea, and the light of his brow shone unquenched. Sometimes he would descend in the still hours of the night, when the stars were bright, and look upon the waves where Beleriand had been. In those moments, he felt both grief and peace, for though all he had known was lost, the world yet endured, and his labor had not been in vain. From the shadow of the mountains came the survivors of the war, the remnant of elves and men and dwarves. They looked up at the bright star that burned each evening in the western sky, and hope filled their hearts. To them it was no mere light, but a promise that no darkness could reign forever. The Valar, having achieved their purpose, withdrew once more to Aman. The Maiar departed from Middle-earth, save a few who were bidden to remain as watchers. Eärendil, the herald of the Elder King, gathered the banners of the West and made ready to depart. But before he went, he sought out those of the children who had fought most bravely in the final war. He found Elros and Elrond, the sons of Eärendil, standing amid the ruins of Balar, gazing westward across the grey sea. They were fair and tall, alike in face, but in their eyes burned different fires. Elros's bright and eager, Elrond's deep and thoughtful. Then Eärendil spoke to them, saying, "You are the children of both kindreds, elf and man, as your father was. The Valar grant you a choice that comes to no others. To which race you will belong until the world's end. Choose now, and your fate shall be bound to that choice for all ages." Elros looked to the west, where the star of his father shone above the sea, and his heart leapt with the fire of men. "I will walk beneath the sun," he said, "and build anew in the lands that remain. Though my life be brief, it shall burn bright while it endures." Elrond bowed his head. "Then I will remain with the firstborn," he answered, "to preserve the memory of what was lost, and to guide those who come after. Long shall my days be, yet my heart will not forget the doom of men." Eärendil inclined his head. "So shall it be. The fates of both kindreds are sundered, yet forever entwined. Go now, sons of Eärendil, and let the light of your father's star be your guide." Thus it came to pass that Elros was made the first king of Númenor, that fair island raised from the sea by the Valar as a gift to men. There the Edain, who had remained faithful, were gathered and given long life and great wisdom. And in the days of their glory, they often looked westward, longing for the light of Aman that they could never reach. But Elrond dwelt still in Middle-earth, in the havens and hidden vales that survived the ruin. To him came the scattered elves, seeking counsel and peace. For a time the world knew rest, and though the wounds of war ran deep, the memory of Morgoth's shadow grew dim. Yet not all evil was ended. From the ruin of Angband, many foul things crept away, creatures of fire and claw, and spirits of malice that had served the dark enemy. And among these was one who had been Morgoth's greatest servant, though few yet knew his name: Sauron, the Mire of Orle, who had turned to darkness. When he saw his master cast into the void, fear seized him, and he fled in secret, hiding in the wild places of the world. For a time he lay hidden, like a snake beneath the stones, but his heart was black and restless, and though he trembled before the might of the Valar, he longed still for power. He began to whisper again, softly and unseen, weaving deceit among the peoples of Middle-earth. Eärendil, high in the sky, saw the faint stirrings of that shadow and grieved. But his task was not to fight upon the earth. He could only shine, a herald of warning and of hope. His light burned brighter when the dark returned, and the hearts of those who gazed upon him were strengthened. Lindwyn, who had remained in the havens with Círdan, would often climb to the cliffs and watch the star rise over the sea. "He is not gone," she would whisper. "He watches still." And Barsoom, dwelling deep beneath the mountains of the dwarves, would lift a cup of molten silver to the same star and mutter, "To the mariner who fought beside a dwarf and lived to tell of it." So the ages turned. The sea covered the lands of the First Age, and new shores were born. The men of Númenor built ships that sailed farther than any before, but they could never find the Undying Lands, for the straight road was hidden from mortal eyes. Still they honored Eärendil, and in their tongue they called him Elentari's star, the friend of sailors and the beacon of the west. And whenever darkness rose again in Middle-earth, whether by the hand of Sauron or by the pride of kings, men would look up to the evening sky and see the light of Vingelot blazing bright. It was the same light that had guided them through war and ruin, the same flame that no shadow could quench. Thus the tale of the spear of Eärendil and the black flame passed into legend, told beside the hearths of men and sung beneath the stars of elves. And though ages would pass and kingdoms rise and fall, the memory of that mariner endured. For in every night sky, where the star of hope burns clear, his spirit still sails the heavens, keeping watch over the world he once saved. And in the west, beyond the reach of mortal sight, the Valar looked upon that star and remembered the courage of one who had bridged the doom of both kindreds, uniting their fates forever under the light of the Silmaril. The years after the War of Wrath were years of quiet rebuilding, though the world was forever changed. The waves of the great sea rolled over the lands where once the kingdoms of elves and men had stood, and the mountains of the north were ground to ruin. Yet in the far west, a new island arose, a gift of the Valar to the faithful among men who had fought beside the Eldar. They named it Númenor, the land of gift, and upon it Elros, son of Eärendil, became the first of kings. Under his rule, the island flourished. Its harbors gleamed with white stone, its cities shone beneath the sun, and the sea winds filled the sails of ships that ventured far and wide. The Dunedain, as the people of Númenor were called, grew wise and long-lived, taller and fairer than any other race of men. They learned lore from the Eldar who visited from the Undying Lands, and their tongues were sweet and noble. And every night, when the star of Eärendil rose in the western sky, the people would gather upon the shore. They would lift their hands in reverence and sing songs of the mariner, whose courage had brought them this blessing. For they knew that their lineage and their peace were born of his labor, and that his light still watched over them. Elros ruled for 400 years, and when his time came to pass beyond the circles of the world, he went willingly, content that his kingdom stood strong. But Elrond, his brother, remained in Middle-earth, where he gathered the scattered elves into a new refuge. He dwelt in the hidden valley of Imladris, and from there his wisdom flowed like a quiet river, guiding the peoples of the Second Age. Yet while the world healed, the seeds of new darkness were already sown. In the east, where the shadows of Angband had once lain, there stirred a presence that watched and waited. Sauron, once the lieutenant of Morgoth, had not perished. He took new form, fair and terrible, hiding his true malice beneath a guise of gentleness. He walked among men and elves as a teacher of craft and knowledge, speaking of peace and order, of a world made perfect through strength. He taught the forging of mighty works, and in the smithies of Eärendil, his words found eager ears. There he came to the Gwathi Myrdain, the great elven smiths, led by Celebrimbor, grandson of Feanor, whose hands had once made the Silmarils. Eärendil saw these things from afar. High above, sailing the path of the stars, he beheld the shadow creeping once more across the lands. The flame of his brow burned brighter in warning, but men and elves, lost in their own pride, did not heed its meaning. Then came the forging of the rings of power. Under Sauron's secret guidance, the smiths wrought rings of great might, meant to heal and preserve all that was fair. But Sauron, in the fires of Orodruin, forged in secret a master ring to rule them all. When it was completed, he poured into it the greater part of his own power, and the darkness of his heart gave it life. And once more, the shadow of the black flame returned to the world. It was not the same creature that had been destroyed beneath Gondolin's ruins, but a part of its malice lived on in Sauron's spirit. The same hunger for dominion, the same hatred of light. From his high watch, Eärendil beheld the return of the shadow. The light of the Silmaril upon his brow flared in defiance, and he sent its beam down upon the world like a sword of silver fire. Many of the wise, seeing this light brighter than before, felt fear and wonder in their hearts. Gil-galad in Lindon, and Galadriel far to the south, looked to the heavens and said, "The star burns fiercely. Some evil stirs in the dark." But even as the warning spread, Sauron revealed his true intent. His armies poured from Mordor, and the free peoples of Middle-earth found themselves once more at war. Númenor, hearing the cries of their kin, sent fleets of war across the sea, and their coming broke the strength of the Dark Lord. Sauron's armies fled before them, and he himself was taken captive by the might of Ar-Pharazôn, the last and proudest of Númenor's kings. Yet this seeming victory was the beginning of doom. For Sauron, ever cunning, bent his knee in feigned submission and was brought to Númenor as a prisoner. There, through guile and honeyed speech, he wormed his way into the king's heart, turning his pride against him. In time, Sauron became the counselor of the king and led the Númenorians into darkness. He taught them to envy the immortality of the elves, and to despise the ban of the Valar that forbade them to sail west to Aman. He whispered that Eärendil's light was a lie, that the Valar kept the undying lands only for themselves, and the hearts of men grew hard. From the heavens, Eärendil beheld the slow corruption of his son's people. His star dimmed in sorrow, though its fire never failed. He cried aloud into the void, his voice a wind among the stars. "Beware, my children. Turn back before the sea devours you." But the ears of men were deafened by pride. Ar-Pharazôn raised a vast armada and set sail for the west, seeking to seize immortality by force. The Valar, seeing that no plea would avail, called upon Ilúvatar himself. Then the world was changed. The seas rose in wrath, and Númenor was swallowed in a great cataclysm. The earth was bent, and the straight road to Aman was hidden from all mortal eyes. Only a few escaped, the faithful, led by Eärendil and his sons, who fled eastward before the great wave. They brought with them the memory of Númenor and the wisdom of old, and they founded the realms of Arnor and Gondor in Middle-earth. When the waters fell still and the stars shone once more, Eärendil wept. His light, reflected in the flood's calm, gleamed upon the surface of the sea like tears of silver. The realm his son had ruled was gone, yet his line endured. Far below, in the white city of Gondor's founding, the first kings looked up to the sky and saw the evening star burning above the mountains. They named it Eärendil's flame, and to it they offered words of remembrance and hope. For even in wrath, the Vala had preserved that light, that it might guide those who remained faithful. And Eärendil, sailing still upon the sky, vowed in his heart that as long as his star shone, he would not forsake them. Thus the Second Age unfolded, an age of men and of rising darkness, of kingdoms built upon the bones of the sea, and of hope kept alive by a single shining light in the western heavens. The mariner's task was unending, and his voyage eternal, but his heart remained steadfast. For Eärendil knew, as all who looked upon his light would one day learn, that though shadow may cover the world, it cannot touch the stars. When the seas at last grew calm after the downfall of Númenor, and the broken world settled into its new shape, the lands of Middle-earth lay scarred, yet alive. The mountains of the west had been torn apart by the wrath of the Valar, and the sea had come roaring far inland. But in its retreat it left behind a reshaped shore, a world of new beginnings and buried grief. In those days, the survivors of Númenor, the faithful led by Eärendil the Tall and his sons Isildur and Anarion, came ashore upon the coasts of Middle-earth. They were few, but mighty in heart and heritage, for they carried with them the wisdom of ages and the memory of the West. Upon the hills of the north they built Arda, and in the south they raised Gondor, twin realms that would stand as bastions against the darkness that still lingered in the world. And over their white towers shone the light of Eärendil's star, which they called Gilestel, the Star of High Hope. Each night, the Dunedain would lift their eyes to it, remembering the mariner who had crossed the shadowed sea and pleaded for the salvation of both elves and men. But beyond the mountains, in the black lands of Mordor, the shadow had taken form once more. Sauron, who had escaped the ruin of Númenor, returned to his ancient stronghold, gathering to himself all the creatures of malice that still crawled in the world. His spirit had been maimed by the cataclysm, yet not destroyed, for the One Ring, his instrument of power, remained. And as long as it endured, so did he. He called forth the remnants of his armies, the orcs and trolls, the dark spirits that had fled into the deeps of the earth, and from the mountains of shadow arose the fires of Mount Doom once more. His servants built great fortresses, and in the plain of Gorgoroth, the foundations of Barad-dûr were raised again, blacker and more terrible than before. Eärendil, sailing the upper airs, saw all this, and grieved. His star burned brighter, a warning to the wise, and Gil-galad, last of the high kings of the Noldor, read the omen rightly. He gathered his strength in Lindon and sent messengers to Elendil in the north, for he knew that the time would come when elf and man must unite once more against the shadow. Thus began the forging of the last alliance, a gathering of all the free peoples of Middle-earth to stand against Sauron's dominion. Elves came from Lothlorien and Greenwood the Great, dwarves from the halls of Khazad-dûm, and men from the strongholds of Gondor and Arnor. Beneath the banners of Gil-galad and Elendil, they swore oaths of unity, and their combined host shone like a sea of stars beneath the darkening sky. And ever above them, unseen but watching, sailed Eärendil, his ship blazing like a white fire. When the hosts marched east, the armies of Sauron came out to meet them, and the earth shook beneath their feet. The war of the last alliance began in thunder and blood. For 7 long years the armies fought upon the plains of Dagorlad, where the marshes would later spread. Countless were the slain on both sides, and the air grew thick with smoke and despair. Yet the courage of elves and men didn't fail. Eärendil watched from afar as the hosts of the west pressed upon the gates of Mordor. When at last the siege was laid around Barad-dûr, his light fell upon the battlefield like a benediction. Warriors of the west looked up to the star and found strength renewed. For it seemed to them that Eärendil himself was calling them onward. Then came the final battle upon the slopes of Mount Doom. Gil-galad and Eärendil fought side by side against Sauron, who came forth in terrible majesty, wielding the power of the One Ring. None could stand against him, and the ground cracked beneath his tread. Gil-galad was slain by the heat of his hand, and Eärendil fell beside him, his sword shattered beneath Sauron's blow. But Isildur, son of Eärendil, took up the hilt of his father's broken blade, Narsil, and struck at Sauron with all the strength of despair. The ring was cut from the Dark Lord's hand, and his body was destroyed. His spirit fled, and the shadows of Mordor were scattered. High above, the light of Eärendil flared in triumph, and for a moment it seemed as though all the world shone with his glory. The last alliance had prevailed. Sauron was overthrown, and peace returned to Middle-earth. Yet Eärendil, gazing down upon the field, saw what others could not. The ring still lay unbroken, its fire dim but not quenched. And when Isildur claimed it for his own, saying he would keep it as Weregild for his father's death, a shadow stirred upon the wind. The mariner's heart grew heavy, for he knew that evil, once born, could not so easily be undone. He wept for men and their unheeded wisdom, and his light dimmed in sorrow. Still he sailed, tireless as ever, watching over the world below. Centuries passed, and kingdoms rose and fell. The realm of Gondor waxed in glory and waned again, and the northern kingdom of Arnor faded into shadow. The elves withdrew into their hidden realms, and the dwarves delved deep into their mountains. Men multiplied and spread, forgetting the old stories, though now and then one would look up at the evening star and feel a stirring of wonder, as if recalling a song half remembered from childhood. But Eärendil never rested. Each night his ship crossed the heavens from west to east, bearing the Silmarill's light upon the brow of the world. Sometimes, when storms tore the seas or shadows gathered thick upon the lands, sailors at sea would see the star burn brighter, and they would cry out, "Aya Eärendil Elenion an Kalema! Hail Eärendil, brightest of stars!" Thus he became the eternal guardian of Middle-earth, a symbol of hope against all darkness. The Valar looked upon his steadfastness with love, and Varda herself renewed the light of his ship so that it would never fade until the world's end. Yet Eärendil knew, deep in his immortal heart, that the day would come when his voyage must cease. For all things born of Arda are bound by its fate, and when the world's last battle is fought, and Morgoth breaks his bonds, then shall Eärendil descend once more from the sky. In that final hour he will lead the hosts of the west against the enemy, bearing the spear reforged, and the light of the Silmaril blazing like the dawn. Until that day, he sails on, tireless and unwavering, the last and greatest mariner. His ship is the morning star, his song the whisper of waves in the night. And to every heart that still remembers courage, his light remains a promise, that though shadow may fall, the flame of Eärendil will always rise. Long years passed since the breaking of the One Ring from Sauron's hand, and the kingdoms of men were restored in peace. Yet though the world lay calm, Eärendil's star did not cease its course. Each night it sailed across the vault of heaven, steady and bright, for the mariner's duty was not ended. He was bound to the sky until the end of days, to watch and to warn, to guide and to guard. Beneath his shining light, Middle-earth entered the Third Age. The elves, weary of years and loss, withdrew from the fading lands and looked westward, yearning for Ammon. Their songs grew soft and sorrowful, like echoes of a dream nearly spent. The dwarves delved ever deeper in their halls of stone, seeking treasure and craft, while men spread and prospered, building realms that touched the edges of the world. But all things made by mortal hands decay in time. The pride of kings hardened again, and the wisdom of the Eldar waned. Shadows crept once more across the east, faint at first, then bolder, whispering of old powers not wholly slain. In the ruins of Mordor, the wind moaned with a voice that was not wind alone, and in the hearts of dark things, the will of Sauron began to stir again. High above, Eärendil beheld it. His light flared in warning, as in the elder days when the world had stood upon the brink. He saw the lands beneath grow troubled, the old wounds of Arda bleeding anew. And though he could not descend, for such was his doom, his voice carried upon the winds of night, stirring dreams and prophecies among those who yet kept faith. In the north, where the remnants of Arna lay in ruin, a line of kings endured in secret. They were the Dunedain of the north, heirs of Eärendil, wanderers without crown or kingdom. To them the star of Eärendil was a sign of remembrance, a promise that though their thrones were lost, their blood was not forgotten. In the wilds they watched the borders of the world, unseen protectors of the free peoples. Among them was one born under a sky of fire and frost, a child who looked up from his cradle to see the light of Eärendil gleaming above the hills. In him, the old blood ran pure, mingled of elves and men. His name in childhood was Estel, which means hope, and though he knew it not, he was the destined heir of the kings of old. In later days he would bear another name, and his deeds would shake the world. But that tale lay still in the womb of time. Eärendil's gaze followed him, as it followed all who bore the weight of hope. The mariner's heart, though long sundered from the earth, still loved its peoples deeply. When his ship sailed westward, the Silmaril upon his brow blazed brighter, and in that light the hearts of men were strengthened. In secret halls and in lonely fields, they would look to the star and draw courage from its fire. Meanwhile, in the dark places of Middle-earth, Sauron's spirit gathered strength once more. Without form or face, he cloaked himself in fear and deceit, whispering into the hearts of the proud and the greedy. His servants multiplied, men of the east and south, who remembered his former glory, orcs who had hidden in the mountains, and creatures fouler still. From the shadows of Dol Guldur, his will spread like poison. The wise perceived it dimly and gathered to council. Among them was Mithrandir, whom men called Gandalf, a servant of the Vala, sent to guide rather than rule. He alone among them looked often to the star of Eärendil and understood its meaning. "The flame of the mariner burns still," he said, "and while it shines, no darkness can wholly triumph." Thus the long watch began, the slow, secret struggle that would span an age. In the havens of Lindon, Círdan the shipwright yet lingered, elder of all elves in Middle-earth. Sometimes he would climb the high tower above the sea and gaze westward, watching the star. And when the wind was clear, he thought he could hear faintly the sound of oars upon water, though no mortal ship had sailed those deeps in many lifetimes. "Still he journeys," Círdan would murmur. "Still he guards us. Eärendil the blessed, brightest of stars. His light endures when all else fails." So it was that when darkness grew again, the peoples of Middle-earth did not utterly despair. tales of the mariner and his shining ship were told in the hearth halls of men and the glades of elves. And though the songs grew dim with age, the truth within them didn't fade. For the Valar had set Eärendil in the heavens, not only as a sign of hope, but as a reminder that sacrifice and courage were never forgotten. And far above, beyond the clouds, the mariner's voyage continued. The seas of the upper air were his to cross, calm or stormed by winds unseen. Sometimes he would steer his ship low enough that the light of the Silmaril kissed the mountain peaks, and shepherds watching their flocks by night would whisper prayers to him. Other times, when he rose high above the world, he could see the curve of Arda like a sleeping jewel beneath him, wreathed in mist and starlight. There were moments, rare and fleeting, when his thoughts would drift to the world he had left behind, the laughter of Elwing, his beloved, whose form was now a white bird that flew sometimes beside his ship, the face of Tuor his father, brave among men, the proud towers of Gondolin, now buried beneath the sea. He felt no bitterness, only a deep, endless yearning, as though all that he had loved were waiting just beyond the horizon of the stars. In that solitude, he sang, as he had in the days of his youth upon the mortal sea. His voice, though none could hear it clearly, wove through the heavens and touched the dreams of sleeping mariners. To some it came as the sound of distant bells, to others as the murmur of waves against a forgotten shore, and those who dreamed thus awoke with courage kindled anew, for the music of Eärendil carried the blessing of the Valar. Yet he knew that his watch would not be eternal. The doom of Arda still moved toward its end, slow and unrelenting. The world was wounded, and the great enemy beyond the stars, the true shadow that had spawned Morgoth himself, still stirred in the dark beyond the void. The time would come, so the Valar had spoken, when the walls of the world would be broken and Eärendil would descend once more, spear in hand, to join the final battle. Until that hour, he endured. His ship moved through the firmament as faithfully as the tides, marking the passage of ages. The Silmaril blazed upon his brow, a light undying and pure. Below him, the lands of Middle-earth shifted, kingdoms rose and fell, and the hearts of men turned ever toward his star. And so the mariner kept his vigil, steadfast and silent, his flame a bridge between heaven and earth. For though the world changed, and even the memory of the elder days grew dim, the light of Eärendil never wavered. It remained, the last echo of the first music, the promise of renewal after every shadow. In every age when darkness gathered, the star returned to the minds of men. And in every heart that still dared to hope, the voice of the mariner whispered, "Fear not the night. I sail still. My light is yours until the world's end." 1,000 years had come and gone since the fall of Sauron in the War of the Last Alliance, and still Eärendil's star glimmered above the western horizon. To some it was no more than a point of light, but to the wise it was a sign eternal, the unbroken flame of hope. Yet in the deep places of the world, the servants of darkness labored in secret, and whispers of shadow stirred again. The kingdoms of men waxed and waned. Gondor, once proud and strong, began to wither in pride and complacency. Kings grew greedy for glory, building tombs greater than their palaces, and their wisdom turned to folly. The blood of Númenor, that ancient and noble line, thinned with the passing of years. In the north, Arnor had long fallen to ruin, its lands broken into feuding realms. Only scattered wanderers, the Dunedain Rangers, still kept the watch their fathers had sworn, unseen but steadfast in the wild. Above them all, the mariner still sailed. His course never faltered, though his heart ached for the world below. Eärendil saw the decay of kings and the stirring of darkness, and he mourned as one might mourn a beloved child walking once more into peril. Often his gaze turned to the east, where Mount Doom's fires lay long cold, but where faint tremors glowed again beneath the crust of the earth. In time, he saw a small glimmer of light arise to meet the shadow's growth. The elves, who had retreated into their last sanctuaries, began to stir once more. In Imladris, Elrond Half-Elven, son of Eärendil, gathered the wise and counselled vigilance. In Lothlorien, Galadriel of the Golden Wood watched the east with eyes that pierced all veils of darkness. She spoke seldom, but when she lifted her gaze to the night sky, her thoughts turned to the mariner who was her kin. Once, in the deep silence of midnight, she raised her hand toward the shining star and whispered, "The world darkens again, Eärendil. If your light can pierce the clouds of our despair, let it be now." And Eärendil, though she could not hear him, answered in his heart, "My flame burns ever for the sake of the world, and it shall burn brighter when the night is deepest." So it came to pass that the shadow gathered again. Sauron's spirit, long hidden, took new form in the east, and the power of Mordor rose from the dust. The fortress of Barad-dûr was rebuilt, and once more the Eye of Fire opened above its pinnacle, seeking, watching, the Nine, who had been kings of men, walked the earth as wraiths, bound to the will of the ring. Eärendil beheld their coming, and trembled with pity. He remembered the frailty of men, and the weight of their doom. Still, he could not descend, for his place was fixed among the stars. But his light grew stronger, piercing even the veils of cloud that hung over Mordor. And when his beam fell upon that land, the servants of Sauron turned their faces away in fear, for the fire of the Silmaril burned against all shadow. As the centuries turned, whispers spread among the free peoples, rumors of a ring lost and sought, of a weapon that could unmake the Dark Lord if found. Eärendil's gaze followed the tale as it wound through ages, from the ruins of Isildur's death to the quiet waters of the river Anduin, where the ring lay hidden for long years. He watched unseen as small hands found it again, and as evil began its slow return. Yet amidst that growing peril, a new hope stirred, small and unlooked for, as all true hopes begin. In the Shire, a land far from war and memory, a peaceful folk lived their simple lives beneath the same stars that had watched over the world since its making. Among them, Eärendil saw a light no less pure than that which he bore, a courage untainted by pride. He looked upon Frodo, son of Drogo, and upon Samwise his companion, and though they could not see him, the mariner's heart was moved. When Frodo stood upon the borders of Lothlorien, weary and afraid, Galadriel spoke to him of the star. She placed in his hand a crystal phial, catching the light of Eärendil's Silmaril, and said, "May it be a light to you in dark places, when all other lights go out." And so it was. When the hobbits came to the desolation of Mordor, the shadow pressed upon them like a living weight. Yet when all seemed lost, Frodo's hand closed upon the phial, and the light of Eärendil blazed forth. Its radiance drove back the darkness and struck terror into the creatures of the enemy. Even the dreadful Shelob, spawn of Ungoliant, fled from its flame. From his high ship, Eärendil saw the glow of his light mirrored far below, and his spirit leapt with joy. "So the fire endures," he cried. "Though ages have passed, and my children's children are dust, still the courage of the small defies the shadow." He watched through many nights as the final journey of the ring-bearers unfolded, until the day when the ring was cast into the fires from which it came. The mountain erupted in flame, the towers of Barad-dûr crumbled, and Sauron's spirit was at last undone. The mariner's ship burned with brilliance unseen since the First Age. Across all Middle-earth, those who looked up at the heavens beheld his star shining as never before, clear, fierce, and beautiful. It was said among the elves that in that hour Eärendil himself wept with joy, and the tears he shed fell through the air as silver rain upon the sea. Peace returned again, though the world was weary from its long travail. The elves departed westward, their ships gliding over the waves toward the undying lands. Among them sailed Elrond, son of Eärendil, and Frodo the Ring-bearer, bearing the phial whose light had been the mariner's gift. When they passed into the sunset, the sea seemed to glow as though the Silmarill's reflection danced upon its surface, welcoming them home. Eärendil watched their coming from afar, and when Vingilot met them upon the western wind, he beheld his son once more. No words passed between them, but their hearts knew one another across the light. Elrond bowed his head in reverence, and the mariner's ship turned again to its endless course. Ages later, when men became the chief heirs of the world, and the elves were no more but a fading memory, still the star of Eärendil burned above the seas. Sailors called to it in prayer, lovers swore oaths by its flame, and kings looked to it in times of doubt. None now remembered its full story, but all felt its power, and so it remains to this day, a single light undying, born of sacrifice and boundless hope. Its name has changed through the tongues of ages, yet its meaning endures. The promise that even in the blackest night, a light of truth and courage shall always shine. Thus the mariner's voyage continued, and though the ages turned and the stars themselves shifted in their courses, the flame of Eärendil remained steadfast, an unyielding sentinel above a weary world, until the breaking of the world and the dawn of its renewal. The Fourth Age dawned with golden peace upon the lands of men. The great shadow was at last defeated, and Sauron's malice, long a stain upon the world, was gone. The kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor were reunited beneath one banner, and upon that throne sat Elessar, the heir of Isildur, last of the line of Elendil, and far descended from Eärendil the mariner. Under his rule, the white tree bloomed again in Minas Tirith, and the city shone like a gem of the morning. The fields about the Anduin were green once more, and the towers of the north rose from ruin. Men spoke in wonder of the peace that had come, for never in memory had such harmony been known between the realms of Middle-earth. Yet far above their joy, beyond wind and cloud, the star of Eärendil still sailed. The mariner's light glowed calm and watchful, for though the world seemed healed, his task was unending. He looked down upon the realm of his distant heir and smiled, though his heart was touched by sorrow. For all the triumphs of men, he knew that their lives were but passing shadows beneath the wheel of the world. Eärendil saw the years move like waves upon the sea. He beheld the reign of Elessar flourish, and then, like the fading of the sun, wane into the long twilight of mortal time. He watched as the elves departed one by one, until their voices no longer sang upon the wind. The havens grew silent, and the last white ship set its sails for the west. Even Círdan, the shipwright who had once sent Eärendil forth, passed into the unseen lands. When the last of the Eldar left the shores of Middle-earth, a stillness fell upon the sea. For a long while, the mariner beheld no gleam of elvish light upon the waters. It seemed to him that the world had turned a page in the great book of Arda, and that the age of his kin was truly ended. But still his ship, Vingilot, sailed its immortal course. The Silmaril upon his brow burned steadily, and its fire could not be quenched by time or weariness. Often he would gaze down upon the lands where once the great cities of the elves had stood, now but ruins overgrown with grass, and his heart would whisper of memories, of Idril's laughter in the courts of Gondolin, of Tuor's hand upon his shoulder, of the sea winds of Nevrast in his youth. Elving, his beloved, still came to him as a white bird, alighting upon the deck of Vengilot when the stars were kind. Together they would watch the world below, and though words were seldom between them, love flowed like the tide, ancient, unbroken, and beyond speech. In time, even the mighty kingdoms of men changed. The line of Elessar endured, but as the ages turned, the wisdom of old grew dim. Great cities were raised where forests had once stood. The tongues of men multiplied. The songs of the elder days were forgotten by all but a few who still lingered in the hidden corners of the earth. Yet the star of Eärendil remained. Farmers and wanderers looked upon it from lonely fields and mountain passes, calling it by many names: the traveller's flame, the watcher of the west, the star of memory. Few knew its true nature, but all who saw it felt peace. Sometimes, when the night was clear and the air was still, the mariner's light seemed to burn brighter, as though he listened to the voices below. For though he couldn't descend, the prayers of men reached him faintly across the gulfs of sky. He heard the cries of sailors caught in storms, the songs of mothers who sang to their children beneath his glow, and the silent pleas of kings who feared their thrones would fall. To all these he gave what comfort he could, the steady shining of hope, unbent and unbroken. And in this he found solace for his own longing. In that far-off age there came a night unlike any other. The stars of heaven grew still, and the air of the world trembled. From beyond the walls of Ae came a whisper, vast and solemn, the music of the Ainur, faint yet clear, as though the world itself remembered its first song. Eärendil stilled his ship upon the winds, and Elving came to stand beside him. "Do you hear it?" she asked, her voice soft as the sea's sigh. He nodded, his eyes alight with wonder. It is the echo of the beginning. The song returns. And then he beheld a vision. The earth renewed, green and young once more. The mountains rising pure and white, the seas clear as glass. The shadow that had marred the world was gone, and the light of the One shone unbroken. The Valar stood again upon the shores of Aman, and the children of Ilúvatar, both men and elves, walked together in peace beneath the same sky. But the vision passed, and Eärendil was alone once more upon his eternal voyage. He knew then that the end was not yet. The world's healing would come, but in a time beyond all reckoning. Until that day, his task remained, and so Vingilot sailed on. Through calm and tempest, through the long silences between the turning of ages, the mariner kept his watch. The flame upon his brow did not dim. The light of the Silmaril was forever steadfast. It is said that sometimes, when the night grows very deep and the air holds the scent of the sea, those who wander alone may hear the faint sound of oars upon the water and the distant cry of a gull. Then they look up and see the bright star burning above the western horizon. And though they may not know his name, they feel a peace beyond understanding. For the mariner still sails the upper seas, keeper of the last light of the elder days, watching over the world that was both his burden and his gift. His flame is the memory of all that was noble and pure, the courage of the weak, the mercy of the strong, and the hope that survives when all else fails. Thus the tale of Eärendil does not end, for no ending can contain him. He is the song unforgotten, the bridge between heaven and earth, the light that shall return when the final darkness comes. And in that day, when the shadow beyond the stars stirs once more, and Morgoth breaks his bonds in the outer void, then Eärendil shall descend from the sky, spear in hand and light ablaze, to lead the hosts of the west in the last battle. The sea and sky shall burn with his glory, and his voice will be as the cry of 1,000 trumpets. Until that hour, he sails on, unchanging, unyielding, forever the mariner of hope. His light is the heart of the night, and his memory the soul of the world. So long as his star endures, the darkness shall never wholly conquer, and the children of Arda will know that even in the blackest abyss there is always light, born of sacrifice, guarded by love, and shining, undying, across the sea of stars. A hush lay over the heavens, vast and solemn, as though even the stars were holding their breath. The long ages of the world had rolled onward, kingdoms risen and fallen, and still the mariner's ship coursed upon the winds above Arda. Eärendil's light had shone through every age since the elder days, and in its glow the memory of all that once was remained unforgotten. Now the world was older than any tale, and its seas were wide and strange. The tongues of men had changed beyond reckoning. The old songs were but fragments upon the lips of bards, and even the names of elves were legends lost to most. Yet the star endured, steadfast as ever. The flame of the Silmaril burned no less bright, though the earth itself seemed weary of time. Eärendil looked down upon the lands below, and his heart was filled with both love and sorrow. For though the ages passed like the tides of the sea, the nature of the children of Ilúvatar remained the same. He saw the wars of men, the building and breaking of empires, the greed and glory, the kindness and cruelty intertwined. He saw hope rekindled and hope betrayed, and through it all his light fell upon the world as it always had, unjudging, unceasing. Elving came often to him, alighting upon Vingulot, as she had done since the world's first dawn. Together they watched the slow fading of Arda. Sometimes she sang to him the songs of the shore, the murmuring of waves upon Aman, the laughter of the birds, the whisper of leaves in the gardens of Lorien. And though those sounds were now distant beyond time, her voice carried the memory of all that was fair. "Will the world ever be healed?" she asked one night, as they looked upon the dimming of the stars. Eärendil's gaze did not waver. "It will be healed," he said, "though not in this age nor the next, for the music of the One still weaves through the dark, and the last chord has not yet been struck." He turned his eyes to the farthest west, beyond the veil that hid Aman from mortal sight. There, upon the borders of the world, the Valar waited in patience, for they too knew that the end must come. Morgoth still brooded in the outer void, gnawing his hate like a wound that never healed. The promise of the final battle hung in the silence of eternity, and all creation seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the last movement of the song. Eärendil knew that when that hour came, his ship would no longer sail the stars. The Silmaril's light would descend to the fields of Arda once more, and he would lead the hosts of the west to war against the shadow that had never wholly died. His heart did not tremble at this knowledge, for though he was weary beyond words, his courage was eternal, born of sacrifice and sanctified by love. So he watched, and he waited, and the world beneath him turned. There came a night unlike any other, when the stars themselves began to fade from the sky. One by one they dimmed, their fires softening to embers. The moon was gone, and even the sun's warmth seemed thin and distant. A deep quiet filled the heavens, vast and terrible, and in that silence, Eärendil knew that the end of Arda was drawing near. He stood at the prow of Vingilot, the sea of heaven calm beneath him. Elving was beside him, her eyes filled with tears that glimmered like pearls. "The world is dying," she said softly. "All the light we have guarded, all that was made beautiful, it passes into memory." "Not all," he answered. "What is true can never die. Light is not lost, even when its bearer fades. The flame lives on in every soul that has ever dared to love or hope. When the final darkness falls, that flame will rise again." Below, the world trembled. Mountains shuddered. Seas withdrew from their shores, and the sky was filled with strange colors, the hues of creation unmade. Great storms rolled across the ruins of the lands, and the winds howled with voices of both grief and wonder. Then came a sound like thunder beyond the walls of the universe, and Eärendil knew that Morgoth had broken his bonds. From the void, the black enemy returned, clothed in a darkness deeper than the night of the world's beginning. His voice was a roar that shattered the firmament, crying vengeance upon all that lived. Yet as his shadow spread, the stars flared anew. The Silmaril upon Eärendil's brow blazed with a light beyond all reckoning, pure, white, and vast. Across the heavens it shone, and from the west came answering glory. The banners of the Valar, the hosts of the Maiar, and the armies of the dead who had served the light in ages past. Eärendil lifted his spear, reforged from the shards of Aeglos and tempered in the fire of the Silmaril. It gleamed with cold flame, and his ship turned its prow toward the east, where the darkness gathered thickest. Elving stood at his side, radiant as a morning star. Together they led the light forward, and the sea of heaven burned with fire as bright as the dawn. Below, in the shadowed lands of Arda, men lifted their eyes to the sky and saw the stars blazing as they hadn't since the world was young. They beheld the mariner descending from the heights, his light outshining all others, and their hearts rose in courage. For they knew then that the end had come, but not in despair. The battle of the last day began with a sound like the breaking of the world. The darkness of Morgoth met the flame of Eärendil, and all creation trembled in their clash. Light and shadow swirled together, filling the heavens with fire. The seas boiled, the mountains fell, and the winds carried the echoes of songs older than time. Long the struggle raged, but Eärendil's light did not falter. At last, when the black enemy was cast down once more, bound beyond the circles of air, the mariner's ship came to rest upon a sea newly made. Around him shone the reborn stars, and the world below lay quiet and still, a world cleansed and remade, green and fair beyond imagining. Then Eärendil lowered his spear, and the Silmaril's light softened to peace. Elving took his hand, and the wind stilled around them. "It is finished," she said, and her voice was like the sigh of the ocean upon the shore. "Yes," he answered, "at last the voyage is ended." And so it was that the mariner of hope, who had sailed the heavens through uncounted ages, found rest at last. His light remained upon the sky as a blessing, though he himself passed beyond the world's bounds into the thought of Ilúvatar, where no shadow may follow. The children of the New World, when they beheld the evening star in their time, did not know his name, nor the battles he had fought. Yet they felt its warmth, and in their hearts they knew that light had never truly left them. For Eärendil's flame was woven into the music of creation, a note that would never fade. It was the promise of renewal, the whisper of the sea, and the heartbeat of hope in every soul that looked to the stars. Thus ends the tale of the mariner and the black flame, of war and sorrow, of love that conquered the abyss, and of a light eternal that no night could extinguish. And though the world has changed beyond count, still the heavens remember, and still the star of Eärendil shines.